They mocked her tears in court. But the truth made everyone regret it. The courtroom was unusually cold that morning, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the tension that clung to the air like a damp fog. Every eye in the room seemed to be fixed on her, the young woman sitting at the defense table with trembling hands and eyes red from sleepless nights. Her name was Amara Nwosu, 24 years old, slight in build, and with the kind of quiet presence that made her easy to overlook, at least until now. Today, she was the center of a storm she never imagined being in. As the judge entered, the court clerk called for order. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room like a warning bell. Amara kept her eyes lowered, gripping the edge of the table as if it could anchor her in a sea of judgment. From the prosecution's table, the opposing lawyer, tall, sharp-suited, and wearing the smug expression of a man who thought he had already won, watched her closely. He had built his entire case on the belief that Amara was guilty. And, truth be told, so had most of the spectators sitting in the gallery. They didn't see a scared young woman. They saw the headlines that had been plastered across social media. Local teacher accused in shocking theft. Betrayal in broad daylight. The case of the missing funds. Her tears that morning, quiet, almost restrained, were not winning her any sympathy. In fact, a few people in the back snickered, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. Crocodile tears, one woman muttered. She's just trying to look innocent, another replied. Amara heard every word. She wished she could block them out, but the words burrowed deep. She had once believed that truth would be enough, that if you hadn't done anything wrong, the system would protect you. But now, sitting there under the heavy weight of 100 suspicious eyes, she wasn't so sure anymore. The case was simple, at least on the surface. A large sum of money had disappeared from a charity fundraiser organized at the local community center. Amara, a volunteer treasurer for the event, was accused of siphoning the funds into her own account. The prosecution claimed the evidence was clear and undeniable. The truth, however, was far more complicated, and far more painful. 2 months earlier, the air in the community center had been filled with the sounds of laughter, clinking cups, and the warm hum of neighbors catching up after weeks apart. Amara had been at the center of it all, not as the life of the party, but as the one quietly making sure everything ran smoothly. She loved the charity events. For her, it wasn't just about raising money. It was about watching strangers become friends over shared plates of food, and seeing the joy on the faces of the children who would eventually benefit from the funds. The fundraiser that day was for a new library in the children's wing, something Amara had personally championed for months. She had spent countless hours organizing, handling donations, and keeping meticulous records. That's why it hit her so hard when the committee chair, Mr. Gideon Ayula, called her into his office the next week. He didn't even look up from the papers on his desk when he said, "Amara, we've discovered a serious discrepancy in the accounts. The fundraiser's funds, over 4 million nairas, have vanished." Her heart sank. "What? That's impossible. I double-checked every transaction. The bank records show transfers into your account. I don't know how you explain that." For a moment, Amara couldn't speak. She had heard of situations like this. Clerical errors, mistaken identities. But to hear that the money was supposedly in her account. That was beyond absurd. "Mr. Ayula, I never. The board has decided to report this to the authorities. You can explain to them." There was no discussion, no real chance for her to defend herself. She left the office shaking, not from guilt, but from a deep and creeping dread. What Amara didn't know was that the trap had been set long before the fundraiser even began. Someone had been watching her, not just her work ethic, but her vulnerabilities. She had recently lost her father, and the funeral expenses had left her struggling to keep up with bills. To outsiders, it was the perfect narrative. Young woman, financial hardship, sudden opportunity. And somewhere in the shadows, the real thief was smiling. It started with a knock on the door. Not the friendly, "I've come to borrow sugar," knock, but the heavy, deliberate thud of authority. When Amara opened it, 2 uniformed officers stood there. The taller one spoke first. "Miss Amara Nwosu, we have a warrant for your arrest." The words hit harder than any physical blow. She barely had time to grab her slippers before they were leading her outside. Neighbors had gathered, pretending not to stare, but their eyes followed her every step. A few whispered, "I told you something was off." Imagine, and she looked so innocent. The ride to the station was silent, except for the clink of the handcuffs whenever she shifted. Inside, she was fingerprinted, photographed, and asked to sign statements she didn't fully understand. The police had only one piece of evidence: the transfers into her bank account, but to them, that was enough. The investigation was quick, too quick. In less than a week, she was in court for her first hearing. Social media exploded with half-truths and assumptions. Someone had even posted her mugshot online, captioned, "From charity to criminal, how greed ruins lives." By the time her trial began, most of the town had already judged her guilty. Even some former friends crossed the street to avoid her. But Amara knew something they didn't. She had noticed details in the bank statement that didn't add up. Transfers that happened while she was volunteering in public, times she could prove she wasn't even near a device. All she needed was one chance to tell her side. But in this courtroom, chances felt rare. The courtroom was colder than Amara expected, both in temperature and in spirit. She could feel the weight of the stares, every eye fixed on her like she was already convicted. The prosecutor's opening statement painted her as a cunning opportunist. "Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant exploited the community's trust for personal gain. And now hides behind her tears." At that, a small ripple of laughter spread through the audience. Even the judge, a stern man with silver hair, glanced at her as if she were already guilty. When it was finally her turn to speak, Amara stood slowly. Her hands trembled, and yes, tears began to stream down her cheeks. But they weren't from shame. They were from frustration, and from the crushing loneliness of knowing no one believed her. "I have been accused of stealing from the very people I love. People I've served, not for money, but because I believe in building something better for our children. But I didn't take that money." The prosecutor smirked, whispering to his assistant. A few people in the gallery chuckled again. Amara took a deep breath, then reached into a folder her lawyer had placed on the table. She pulled out screenshots of her phone's location history, each one showing she was at the community hall at the exact moments those mysterious transfers were made. "These transactions were made while I was serving food, with my hands full of trays. Tell me, how does a person send thousands of naira to their own account while carrying soup for 30 guests?" The room grew quieter. Then she produced something else, a printed copy of a police report she'd filed weeks before the fundraiser. "This is a report I made when my debit card went missing. I didn't know who had it, until I saw the transfers." Her lawyer took over from there, revealing that the card had been used from a device registered to Mr. Gideon Ayula's office computer, the very man who accused her first. Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge's expression shifted from skeptical to sharp and calculating. For the first time in weeks, Amara could feel the tide turning. The judge leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Gideon Ayula. "Mr. Ayula, do you deny that this device belongs to you?" Gideon's lips moved, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face. "Answer the question," the judge pressed. Finally, Gideon stammered. It's my computer, but someone else must have used it." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Convenient, yet our forensic team confirms your login was active at the exact times the transfers occurred. No one else had the credentials." Whispers swirled through the gallery like wind through dry leaves. People who had once avoided Amara's gaze were now looking at her with wide, guilty eyes. Her lawyer stepped closer to the bench. "Your Honor, we ask that all charges against my client be dismissed immediately. And that an investigation into Mr. Ayula's activities begin at once." The judge's gavel struck sharply. "Case dismissed. Mrs. Amara is free to go. Mr. Ayula, you will be taken into custody for fraud, theft, and perjury." Gasps erupted. Two officers moved in, taking Gideon by the arms. His arrogance crumbled. His eyes darted around the room, searching for anyone who might defend him. No one moved. Amara stood frozen. It was over. The chains of suspicion that had bound her for months had finally been shattered. Then something unexpected happened. The same people who had laughed at her tears moments before now approached her one by one, whispering apologies. "We're sorry, Amara. We didn't know. You didn't deserve this." She didn't respond with anger. Instead, she simply said, "Be careful who you believe. And be slower to judge." As she stepped out of the courtroom into the warm sunlight, the weight lifted from her chest. She had walked in as a woman broken by lies. She walked out as proof that truth, though slow, always arrives. And everyone who had mocked her tears. They would never forget the day they learned that some tears are not weakness, but a warning that a storm is coming for the real guilty.
People who had once ridiculed her online were now flooding her social media with apologies, support, and praise. Strangers sent letters. Advocacy groups reached out to partner with her. Maria didn't just walk away with a legal win. She walked away with a platform, a voice amplified by the very people who once doubted her. Instead of disappearing into quiet relief, Maria made a choice. She started a foundation to help women facing workplace injustice, especially those who were pregnant and vulnerable. Her story became a beacon of hope, proof that resilience could turn the tide even when the world seemed stacked against you. She gave speeches. She sat on panels. She told her story over and over, not because she wanted pity, but because she wanted others to know they could fight and win, too. If you're hearing this and you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or made to feel small, let Maria's story remind you. Truth is a weapon, but courage is the hand that wields it. Don't stay silent. Don't back down. Share this story with someone who needs to know they're not alone. And if you want to see more stories of justice and courage, hit subscribe and join us. Your voice matters.